All right, so in this piece, we are working to make our symbols be a little bit more low key in the composition and not have them be all about the symbols, but just supporting roles. And I'm also asking you to look at radial symmetry or the use of a spiral in your composition. So you can see that just the flower and then the hummingbirds are creating some radial symmetry, and the rest of the composition, it's doing its own thing. If you would like the radial composition to take up the entire composition, you may do that. Think of a mandala. A mandala is a perfect example of radial symmetry that takes up the entire composition. But it doesn't have to take up the whole composition. It could just be an element. So you can see that I've started my flower with a circle and then a spiral within. And then that is going to allow me to place my petals and play with that spiral. And I didn't mention earlier, but I did make a line to make this a square composition instead of a rectangle. I think it's important to play with different types of shapes for your backgrounds, for your substrates. And I love working in a square, in a circle, in a rectangle, but I think I really prefer squares and circles. So from that sketch, I am continuing to reference the sketch as I sketch all of my leaves and stems and all of the other elements that I know I want to have in the piece with a light 4H pencil. And I've found that looking at pictures of flowers, and you can even trace a flower, is really fun. I also like to just make them up because then I get to just stay in my little la-la land and have my own creations unfurl. And I wanted to have a lot of little heart-shaped petals, kind of thinking about how my hummingbirds would have lots of little areas to receive nectar when coming to this flower. So now I'm kind of flexing a little bit of that pattern making with the repetition of this hummingbird. So I'm referencing an image that I found on Pinterest and simplifying into the shape of the hummingbird. And then I want to repeat that hummingbird. So I am going to copy it onto another piece of paper so that I can actually use it to trace the same shape over and over again. So I've just got a thin piece of drawing paper, and then on the back of my drawing, I'm covering the whole area with graphite. And now I'm cutting the shape, and now I have a little stencil essentially. So I'm taking the little hummingbird with the graphite on the back, and now I'm drawing over the lines with that 4H pencil again. And the graphite that I put on the back side is actually coming off on the paper. Voila! So I've got all the ones that I want on there. I've done all my erasing, and now I'm kind of lightening up areas, and I'm using a soft brush to get rid of all the eraser marks. And now I'm ready to paint with watercolor. So this whole piece is watercolor and a little bit of gold Posca paint pen at the end. So I'm starting with just the water, and then I add the color. Feel free to do some color tests beforehand if you like. Always practice if you're unsure. And in this case, I have that whole section on the left that's not being used, so that's a good practice area. If you choose to work in a square, just put that little edge on the same side as the hand you are. So I'm left-handed, so that area is on the left side. And you could test out colors there or whatever you like. So I'm adding this bright pink with a tiny little bit of blue-green that mixes together to create a purple to give a little bit of variation in this flower. And I'm playing with a range of 3 to 4 colors in this area here. Not too much of a variation, and doing something like this that is repetitive allows you to move in to a meditation. So when you're painting, make sure to tune into the body, make sure that you're relaxed and you're breathing and your jaw isn't all clenched and you are enjoying yourself and just allowing things to happen as they will. Remember, nobody has to see these. These are all just exercises for you to find your flow. So I'm loving this spiral unfurling of all these little petals. It looks really beautiful, and that spiral underneath gave a really good structure for the flower. So now I have these little elixir or nectar droplets that are attracting my hummingbirds, and I paint those in. And then I come into my hummingbird shape. So I start out with just the body of the hummingbird, and I have some variation within the 5 hummingbirds, so they're not all going to be the same color. And the reason that I paint the middle first and then carry on is so that the bodies can dry, so that when I paint the wings and the tail later, they won't immediately merge the colors together the way that watercolor does. So now I move on to the stem and the leaves, and I'm using a range of greens, and I also use like a yellow ochre color to offset the saturation of the green and bring in sort of a brownish, yellowish color to just warm it up a bit. It's all very saturated, and I love the way that hummingbirds are very shiny and bright and colorful. And so I wanted to bring that out in this piece. I wanted to celebrate the fuchsias and the shiny turquoises that you see in a hummingbird with the whole color palette. But after starting on the leaves and seeing how highly saturated it was, I knew I needed some sort of neutral or warmer tone to kind of calm things down a bit. So these leaves, I take my time, I add a little color, I add a little other color, and I just allow them to unfold as they will, allowing for the stem part to kind of pull through into the leaf a little bit. I think that looks nice. So there's that yellow ochre color that looks very golden and orange in this light, but when mixed in with the green, it kind of acts as a brown. And then later on, when I use the gold Posca pen, it's a really beautiful, similar hue for that. So it strengthens and talks to that warm tone. So just really taking my time and loving this delicate, loving watercolor treatment on this smaller piece with little jewel-like accents and details. Now I'm ready to move back to the hummingbirds, adding the wings and the tail, and having fun with just the subtle blending of the colors in those areas, and allowing myself to change it up a little bit for each bird. Then I break up those pinks and those purples with a bluish green hummingbird. So now I'm bringing one of the colors from the tail of that hummingbird into this little portal that is birthing out this whole flower shebang, and then a big drip for balance and to really accentuate the symbol of elixir and the nectar that the hummingbirds are drawn to and will travel great distances to receive. Then I decide the background's a little bit too white, and so I add just a few little areas of creamy orangish golds. And then I go a little wild and splatter. I'm taking a risk here. And then I check out, okay, how's the composition look in the square? And then I say, okay, some of those splatters need to go, and I clean it up a bit. And then it's time for the Posca paint pen. So I wait a little while until it's dry, and then I add some Posca paint pen and I add the water on the brush to allow it to smooth out and blend in to the other areas. So for the most part, I'm using the water with the Posca paint pen in the leaves and in some of the stem and portal elements. And then you can see I have drawn a drip and some stars, and I don't use the water with those. So those are real crisp. Then I want to add a little root pattern, and I want to make sure that the line is horizontal. So I do a little bit of measurements. And start out with sketching it with that 4H pencil, a really light pencil. And then that becomes a gold paint pen. And then I add little teeny tiny specks of gold for the eye on each hummingbird. Just looking around, seeing what else to add for balance. I thought I could get away with not having a snake in this one, but turns out I need a snake. So there it is, and it becomes gold. And there it is, the finished piece. Enjoy this lesson.